All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is the Parsha My Life class, Pinchas, Parshas Pinchas class. Um, just a word or two about this up and coming, very special class is that it is a little different than, um, not different than all the classes we've given, but it's unique class, and that is, I know a lot of people tune in over here because you like to get your Mashiach updates, you like to get your spin on current events and world events and see it from a. It's been a little calm out there a little bit. Wars has been kind of over. Things have kind of been a little bit on the what we might say boring side. I'm sure a lot's going on, but um, and which is very good because it gives us a little bit of a time to get back to just plain old Torah study, which we're going to do this week. It's going to be very much a parsha class, not so much a class on events and on. I'm sure there's some Mashiach here as well. That has to be, but and not even such a Hasidic class, which means not so much into the world of deeper stuff. Just a fantastic, enjoyable, analytical class of a Torah of a story that's related this week in the Torah, and not even so much on the story, but analyzing the way the commentary of Rashi sees this story versus two or three similar stories to it. So we're going to go through an analysis over here. So that's what I'm saying. It's a little technical, and it would help if you get yourself a book of Numbers, a Torah book of Numbers, and there's no big surprises at the end. There's no. If you will follow along this class, you will enjoy the study, and you will be blown away, as I am, by the genius of the Torah scholars of how they had such precise ability to analyze and to see both the commentary of Rashi, how Rashi's insights are so perfect, but also the genius of the Rebbe, because I'm going to share with you a teaching of the Rebbe, of how the Rebbe analyzes Rashi, which is absolutely mind-blowing in terms of the genius of it. It's not meant to be so much of an inspirational class other than a Torah study class, an academic class. So if you enjoy that, stay with me. If you are not into that, then you probably will. Why am I saying that? Because, and even the class description about the title of the class, When Women Stormed the Beis HaMedrash, is a little sensational because I had to create something sensational over here. But I'm saying that because I don't want to be misleading, because a lot of times I get very frustrated if you scroll through YouTube, you see something come up, it catches your interest, it's got like an interesting title, and then you watch it and you see that they just deceived you. They did not give you the information that they're advertising on. So for that reason, I'm letting you know right now, if you're into doing a rich and technical study on the parsha and you enjoy that, like I do, stay along for the journey. If not, come back to another class. If you're looking for deep Hasidism, or if you're looking for powerful inspiration, or if you're looking for a spin on current events, not in this class. All right. Now that we got that all done, let's dive right into it. Okay. So in Parshas Pinchas, now a long time ago, by the way, we gave a lot of such classes, but then things got heated up with Mashiach and so on and so forth, so we focused a lot on that. But here we got a story like this in Numbers, in chapter 27 in the book of Numbers. Okay, Perek Chav Zayin, Parshas Pinchas, talks about an event that happened in the last year when the Jewish people were in the desert, close to entering the land. This is already after the passing of Aaron, the high priest, which happened in the 40th year. Just a short while within the months, Aaron passed away in the month of Av, which is August time, middle of the summer. Moshe is going to pass away in March. In the last 6 months period this is the last period of time the Jewish people are in the desert, the end of the narrative of the Jews passing through the desert and getting ready to enter the land of Israel. They're beginning already to discuss the inheritance of the land, how they're going to settle the land, who's going to get what. Every person went out of Egypt, got a portion of the land. I mean, those people died, but their children got, but it was really an inheritance from their parents who went out of Egypt. Each one was promised a plot of land, which was their real estate given to them by God in Israel. So the story relates how after the Jewish people got some instructions about how that's going to be decided with lotteries and so on and so forth, there were a couple of women who came. Now the division of the land and the setting up of the land was given to the men, the males that went out of Egypt, and to their inheritors. If they died, then the inheritance, as it was understood until that time, was all male inheritance. So over here, it was a couple of women. These were all 5 sisters. They're known as the daughters of Tzelafchad. The Torah actually tells us their names as well. Machla, Noya, Chagla, Milka, V'Tirza. Those are the names of those 5 women. And they were daughters without any siblings. They didn't have any brothers. Their father had passed away, and now they were wondering what's going to happen with the designated real estate that was supposed to go to their fathers, but since there's no male heir to their father's inheritance, what's going to happen with that portion? Is it just going to be lost? It's not going to be given because there's nobody to take that land. So this is what they came, and they brought the question as in front of, and that's what we're going to see. They brought it in front of Moses, in front of Moshe, and we'll see the Torah relates more than just in front of Moshe. And they present their question. And Moshe goes and checks with God and whether they can get an inheritance. And the answer then comes that, when a man dies and there's no boys, so the inheritance goes to the daughters. That's kind of this chidush. That's the novelty that happens with the daughters of Tzelafchad. So there's a whole new section of Torah, not a section, a mitzvah of the Torah regarding the laws of inheritance that was brought to light and brought out, not in the initial transmission of Torah, where all the laws are given initially by God to Moses, but rather this comes as a result of a question. Moshe seeks counsel with God, and God answers and says, hey, give it to those girls, give it to those women. They are right, they have a good claim, and that's the way it's going to be. So these are always the daughters of Tzelafchad. Very few people who come and stage some kind of a question or a protest. So rarely do we find that it ends up good. Most of the times, the people that come up with that are it's always like we're reading in the story. Most of the times, it brings trouble. But in this case, it's one of these nice stories where it has a very good ending. They're coming sincerely. They don't mean any bad. They're not seeking over here to protest the system. They're just asking if they can get a piece of the land, since they don't want their father's land and their father's name to be lost. Anyways, that's the story. What we're going to do over here is not even going to get so much into their question and their answer, but rather the manner in which they presented their request, their Torah inquiry, their halachic inquiry. So the verse says in chapter number 2, in verse 2, let me read first from the beginning. Okay, let's read it quickly. The daughters of Tzelafchad, ben Chefer, who's the son of Chefer, telling us who Tzelafchad is. So Tzelafchad is the son of Chefer, who's the son of Ben Gilad, who's the son of Gilad, Ben Machir, who's the son of Machir, Ben Menashe. Okay, so these are the descendants of Joseph. Menashe is the older son of Yosef. Mishpachas Menashe ben Yosef, who's from the family of Menashe ben Yosef. Ve'ela Shmois ben Osav, and the Torah goes ahead and tells us their name because they deserve the credit for this. Who are they? Machla, Noya, Chagla, Milka, Tirza. 5 daughters. And what do? Vatemando lefnei Moshe. They stand in front of Moshe. They present themselves in front of Moshe. Lefnei Elazar HaKohen, and in front of Elazar the Kohen. Now from here, Talmud derives that this happened after Aaron passed away. Moshe's older brother, Aaron, the high priest, he was not here anymore, or else they would have presented to Moshe and Aaron. The reason it says Moshe and Elazar is Moses' nephew. He's the son of Aaron. So they stand in front of Moshe and in front of Elazar HaKohen. He's currently the high priest. He received that position when his father passed away. And in front of all the heads of the tribes. So let's picture this. They're coming to Moshe to Aaron, and to the front of the Nesiim, the leaders of the tribes, which we know there are 12, right? Each tribe has a leader of the tribe. Then it says, V'chala Eda, and this was in the presence of everybody. The entire assembly was there. And where did this happen? Pesach Ol Hamoed, by the entrance of the tent of meeting. And now they're presenting their question, Lamor saying. And they go on and they present their question. We're not going to learn that. We just kind of want to see the way this whole thing went down. Okay? Common emotion. So Rashi over here has a interesting inquiry. It says Lifnei Moshe. It says in front of Moshe. And afterwards it says Lifnei Elazar, in front of Elazar. So Rashi has a simple question. Efshar and Moshe lo yada. It seems from the verse is first they presented the question to Moses, to Moshe. Moshe doesn't know, so they go to Elazar. And then Elazar doesn't know, they present it to the Nesiim, to the heads of the tribes. That seems very backwards. There's no way that Moshe, who's the one who receives the entire Torah from God, he's the highest authority of Torah, that he doesn't know, and Elazar, his nephew, who was only receiving, used to study from Moshe, he was a big student, that he would know. And then if Elazar doesn't know, that they go and they present it in front of the Nesiim, in front of the heads of the tribes, like why would they know? So the order seems to be messed up over here. What happened? Who did they? Why does it say in front of Moshe? No, that's Rashi's bothers. So what do you do? So Rashi comes up with a solution. What you got to do is you got to flip the verse. You got to do a little rearranging of the verse. You have to read the verse as follows. The order is the way it is stated in the verse is not the way it actually happened. If you want to know how it actually happened, you need to edit the verse and put the order exactly opposite, which is they came first in front of the Nesiim, Lifnei Nesiim, first to the heads of the tribes, and the heads of the tribes were puzzled, didn't have an answer to them. So then they brought the question to a higher up, to a higher authority, and that was the high priest, Elazar. He's from the inner circle right after Moshe. So they kind of come to like Moshe's chief executive beneath Moshe. When Elazar doesn't know, then they brought it in front of Moshe. That's Rashi's first interpretation. It's a little it's a chiddush. It's a novelty. You can actually edit the verse. Now we don't edit it in the literal sense, but in order to expound, Rashi says, in order to expound and understand this verse, you got to edit and change the order, v'darsheyu, and then you can expound it based on that. You can study it based on that. Good, but then Rashi continues and he says, Divrei Rabbi Yashia. These are the words of a great rabbi, Rabbi Yashia. That's how he's one of the sages of the Talmud. And he is the one who says, Tanaic sages, and he says that's the way this verse has to be read, reverse order. But then there's another opinion. Other opinion is by the name of another rabbi called Abba Chanan, who says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, already famous Mishnaic sage, okay, says, no. You don't have to reverse. Don't mess with the verse. Don't touch the verse. Don't edit. Leave the verse as it is. If so, it doesn't make any sense that they would come first to Moshe, then to Elazar, who was much far inferior to Moshe. Why are they coming then first to Moshe and to Elazar? Rashi says, Bais HaMidrash Yoshvin, that all of these were sitting together in the study hall. The Amdulus Nekil Kulam, and they stood in front of all of them. So basically, the reason it says in front of Moshe and the others were because they caught all of them together and they presented their question in the presence of all these rabbis sitting in the study hall. Moses, Moshe, Elazar, the high priest, the heads of the tribes, the Nesiim, they were the ones that were standing over there or sitting over there. And therefore, the verse emphasizes that it was brought in front of them because that's the way it took place, that they were all together. But of course, they wouldn't ask Moshe and then the others. They just presented their question in the study hall, and they were all there. Okay, this is the Rashi. Now, Rashi is saying this in the name of two sages. Again, we got two interpretations. One is, no, the question was asked actually not in front of all of them together. It was one after the other, but you have to reverse the order. You got to edit the verse and reverse the order. That's one of the opinion of one of the rabbis. The other rabbi says, no, don't touch the verse. It's all of them together. Fine. This teaching is in a, Rashi is bringing you a teaching that is stated already in the Sifri. What's the Sifri? The Sifri is a midrashic commentary by the sages on the book of Bamidbar. The book of Bamidbar, there's different. There is in the book of Vayikra. There's the book, I think, on Shemos. There's the Mechilta. Again, these are different names for different midrashic commentary written by the sages of the Talmud or the sages of the Mishnah. So this teaching over here is stated in the Sifri. Rashi brings it over here. These two opinions. Fine. Where this starts to get interesting is that the exact same question and the same exact commentary by these two sages is stated in two other places in the same book, in the book of Numbers. At two other places where there was a question, and it says regarding those questions that they brought it in front of Moshe and others. And in both those places, and we're going to see altogether we have three of them. In all those three places, the Sifri makes the exact same comment and gives both interpretations. What we're going to be questioning tonight is that Rashi doesn't do that, as we're going to see. Rashi is very, very picky in his commentary. Here, in Parshas Pinchas, in this story, he brings the Sifri as it is, and he brings both opinions. But in the other places, he doesn't do that. Let's see first of all what those other places are. So the first of them is in Parshat Bahaloscha. Okay, we go reverse back a couple of weeks ago in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, verse number 6. Okay, Numbers, in the book of Numbers 9:6, Bamidbar pasuk tes, Perek tes pasuk vav. Okay, what's the story over there? That's the famous story of the people that were impure and they couldn't participate in bringing the Karban Pesach in the Paschal Lamb. And they're asking for a second chance. They can't do it, or they want to be part of the ritual of the mitzvah of the offering of the Karban Pesach that they were supposed to do, and they were excited to do it, but they became contaminated, ritually impure. They couldn't be part of it, so they asked, and in the end, similar to our story, they bring forth a new mitzvah. Again, the similarity is very interesting because in both these cases, we have a certain law of Torah or a mitzvah, commandment of the Torah, that is not initially delivered in the traditional way, where God is communicating to Moses, and Moses comes and initiates the mitzvah to the Jewish people, but rather it comes about after some kind of a inquiry or some kind of a request or some kind of a demand, like, which it seems like over there, the people are crying out, they want to be part of it, and God gives them a chance to make it up. And what is that? That in the second, usually the time for the Paschal Lamb is on the 14th day of the first month, which is the month of Nisan. That's the anniversary of the plague of the firstborn when we went out of Egypt. And God says that if you for whatever reason, from now on all generations, when anybody's going to be impure on this day or they're very in a distant place, they can't make it, you have a second chance. You can do it a month later on the 14th day of the month of Iyar, which is the second month. It's called Pesach Sheni. So over there you got the same kind of an event where people are coming and they have a inquiry or a request. And over there it says like this: they were impure and they couldn't do the Pesach. Vayikruvu, and they come close. Lifnei Moshe v'lifnei Aaron. So they present their dilemma and their request in front of Moshe and in front of Aaron bayomahu. Now what's different over there is that it doesn't mention the princes. They're not bringing it in front of the princes, but it does mention Moshe and Aaron. Doesn't just say in front of Moshe. Moshe and Aaron are similar to us. But of us, we have to substitute for Aaron, his son, Elazar. But it's the same idea. They're coming to Moshe and Aaron. So the Sifri over there, and I'm going to read it to you. I don't have the Sifri printed out, but I have it. I looked it up I Googled it. I have the actual Sifri over here. Where are we? Give me a second. Pasuk Vav says the Sifri, Vayamri lifnei Moshe lifnei Aaron bayom hahu. The Sifri asks, Efsher Moshe lo yodea, Moshe doesn't know. Aaron ho yodea? Aaron knows? If Moshe doesn't know, how will Aaron know? Aaron is only receiving the Torah secondhand from Moshe. Moshe speaks directly to God. Ella rather, Siris Amikra v'darshuhu divi Rabbi Yashia. Rabbi Yashia says you got to reverse the order. They first came to Aaron, and Aaron didn't know, so they came to Moshe. You got to move it around. Now, by the way, if you're moving it around, why does the Torah say in front of Moshe and then Aaron? So one of the commentators says because since out of respect for Moshe, we put him first in the verse. We want to put him as the more, as the greater one, because Moshe is the leader of the Jewish people. So he has to be mentioned out of respect of Moshe first, before the students, even though Aaron was his older brother, but he's still a student of Moshe. So Moshe is put first, but a question, an inquiry, came first to Aaron and then to Moshe. Abba Chanan Omer, same name like we have over here. No. Don't mess with the verse. Don't cut and paste. Don't do anything. Leave the verse as it is. What happened was Moshe and Aaron were sitting in the Beis Medrash. They were sitting in the study hall together. The people came and asked their question, so they asked it to both of them. That's why it says to Moshe and to Aaron. Okay. Got it? Same exact commentary. Now before I read the Sifri, I read Rashi by us. But really the Sifri, the Midrash Sifri, on our verse that I mentioned earlier, that I read to you earlier about the daughters of Tzelafchad, it's verbatim, the Sifri, the exact same words. It just changes Aaron with Elazar, but same question. Actually, you know what? Let me read it to you so you'll see it. I have all the sources here. Here we go, Sifri on this verse. Lifnei Moshe, lifnei Elazar HaKohen, Sifri. In Moshe lo yodea, Elazar lo yodea. Exactly like the Sifri says it over there. Elasiris HaMikvah v'der. You got to switch. You got to edit the verse. Same exact words. They came to the Beis. They were in the Beis Medrash. They came to the. So in the Sifri, there's the exact same commentary in Bahaloscha, in Numbers 9, and in Numbers 27. Two different stories, but the same ideas stated by the same sages. Fine. Now, there's one more time that the Sifri makes the exact same comment. Before we get to what Rashi says over here in the book of Numbers, in the story of Pesach Sheni, before we get to Rashi, let's go to the third place. Third place is over here. There, it's in Parsha Shalach, and that is Numbers, Bamidbar, Numbers, Perek Tezvav, which it means chapter 15. Pasuk Lamed Gimel, verse 33. So there it's talking about an episode at the end of Parsha Shalach where there was a Jew that violated the Shabbos. And what was he doing? He was collecting wood. He was gathering wood and tying them together, which was one of the things that you're not allowed to do on one of the 39 prohibited works. So we spoke about 39 prohibited books in last class, in works on Shabbos. This person was violating the Shabbos, and they caught him, but they weren't exactly sure how they knew, as we'll soon see, they knew that someone who violates the Shabbos is punishable by death. They knew. I guess they warned them, and he didn't stop. Whatever. So he had witnesses. They knew that there's a death penalty for violating the Shabbos. But they didn't know there is, in capital punishment, there's various different types. There's 4 different types of execution that they would execute. They didn't know which one. So they brought they brought this man, and they brought, by the way, there's some opinions that say that Tzelafchad, who's there, they're saying our father died. According to some opinions, this Tzelafchad, their father, he was the Makoshish Eitzim. And he's not a bad guy because he didn't do it. He actually did it. The Rashi says he did it with a good intention, why he violated the Shabbos. And he was willing to die for it. I'm not going to get into it right now. It's a lot to discuss. But according to one opinion, it was the Tzelafchad was actually that person. But in any case, over there it says the same thing. Vayakrivu oisei amoitzim oisei, the ones who found him, okay, the witnesses who found him. So they kind of arrested him. And they took this guy, and where did they bring him? El Moshe vel Aaron vel kol Eda, to Moshe, to Aaron, and to the entire assembly. So you got the same thing. They're bringing it to Moshe and to Aaron. What happens? So the Sifri, let me quote you what the Sifri says. Hold the same question. And again, Rashi explain the explanation is that they needed to, why they're bringing him here. There's a halachic question. They don't know which execution. So, but the question is, why does it say Moshe first and then Aaron? Sifri comes, exact same statement. If Moshe lo yedeya, Aaron lo yedeya. If Moshe doesn't know, Aaron knows. Rather, same thing. Siris Amikra Desheo Diver Rabbi Ashia. Rabbi Ashia says, flip the verse around, edit the verse. The interesting thing is that in this time, in this Sifri, the only difference is that it's not, instead of Abba Chanan, it brings Rabbi Yonasan. But in the name of Reb, and instead of Reb Eliezer, it says Elazar. Okay. You can say that Eliezer Elazar is really just a omission by mistake. But Yonasan instead of Abba Chanan, but still the same argument. The Beis HaMedrash who says that they were sitting in the study hall above Amdalef name and they asked the question. So the Midrash is consistent. Got 3 times such a story where you have a question being brought and it mentions Moshe first and then Aaron, and all 3 we get the same consistent answer. So everything is good. Rashi, however, is puzzling. Rashi should raise some eyebrows for those who study Rashi carefully. Because I had told you in our Torah portion of Parshas Pinchas, Rashi brings both opinions. In Parshas Ba'aloscha, let's see what Rashi says. Lifnei Moshe v'lifnei Aaron. This is by the Paschal Lamb. Front of Moshe and of Aaron. So Rashi says, first of all, he doesn't ask a question. He immediately goes to the explanation. When both of them were sitting in the study hall, Ba'u v'sha'alam, they came and they asked him. The law, now Rashi says the question. You can't say one after the other. If Moshe doesn't know, Aaron Minayel know. How would Aaron know if Moshe doesn't know? So it must be that the question was presented to both of them equally at the same time, because they happened to be sitting together and whatever, they were probably studying Torah. They were in the Beis Medrash. So they asked the question to both of them. What are we seeing over here? So what we're seeing over here is that Rashi is bringing the commentary, but he only brings one of those explanations, and actually he brings only the second interpretation of the Midrash. Remember, the first interpretation of the Midrash in all of the 3 places is you got to cut and paste, rearrange the verse. Second interpretation was that they caught them all together, and it was a question that was asked to them in unison. However, Rashi doesn't say about the cut and paste over here. Rashi goes straight. Just the only explanation Rashi gives is that they were sitting together, and he doesn't even bring a name. He doesn't say this is the opinion of so and so. That's his comment over here. Okay. How about in Parsha Shalach, where you have the man who was gathering wood, and the man who's gathering wood, and they bring him to Moshe, to Aaron, and to the entire assembly. Over there, you got curious, what Rashi say over there? Rashi doesn't say a word. Rashi ignores the whole thing. No problem. as if there's nothing is problem. It says the same. It says Vayakrivu oisam el Moshe vel Aaron vel kol ha'eda, and Rashi doesn't have to explain anything. So what is it? Rashi fell asleep. He was a little tired. He missed it. The same thing Rashi explains in two other, one before and one later. So a lot of times you can say, and this is one of the Rebbe's explanations of Rashi, which is an obvious explanation, is a lot of times Rashi feels that he doesn't have to repeat the same explanation more than once. If you came across something like this once in the Torah, and he explained it already, so Rashi's considering that you will remember the idea that he taught you earlier. And the Rebbe actually says that Rashi usually only does that when it's within the same book, it's not too far. Rashi doesn't expect you to remember what he said in the book of Genesis, because maybe it's taking you a couple of years to learn the Torah. You're not learning fast. We're supposed to really learn the Chumash every year, but let's say, you're a student of the Torah. It's going to take you 10 years to go through the 5 books. And so how does Rashi expect that you remember now exactly what he taught you in Genesis? So if you're learning numbers, Rashi won't do that. He will repeat an explanation 2 times. But if it's just last week in the Torah portion, or 3 weeks ago, just a few chapters earlier, Rashi will rely. If that's the case, that would be a good explanation. In Parsha Shalach, Rashi, in the book where the story of the Makoshesh Eitzim, since Shalach is just one Torah portion after Baaloscha Shalach is one Torah portion after. So Rashi is relying just a few chapters later. This was in chapter 9. This is chapter 15. It's not so many chapters after that. So Rashi hoping you still have a memory of what he said. And therefore, he feels that he doesn't have to make a comment. You can figure out alone that just what he said there, that they were all sitting together, would apply over here as well, that they were all sitting together. But if that's the case, that Rashi is already relying that you just learned it and it's still fresh in your mind, you would expect that when it gets to Parshas Pinchas, you still have the same memory. Especially since you had to remind yourself, Shlach. You might say from Bahaloscha to Pinchas, from chapter 9 to chapter 27, that's already, how many chapters? 18 chapters. Okay, you have time to forget. But since in chapter 15, you had to you had the same question, and then you had to recall. And now, especially since you recalled it, you repeat it in your mind already twice. So that's called like a review. Usually when you review something, you remember it better. So the third time, when it comes to the same problem of the third time, and just a few Torah portions further, just a few chapters further, it doesn't seem to require another explanation. So why does Rashi feel that when it comes to the third time, Rashi does feel that he has to give you a comment all over again? He has to explain it. So why? No. Especially since Rashi, the source from where Rashi is taking it from, gives the same exact explanation all 3 times. So that's number 1. Why in Parsha Shalach is there no comment at all? And then in Bahaloscha, Rashi only brings one opinion, which is the second opinion of the Midrash, only one opinion, that they all sat together. But by the third time, at Parshas Pinchas, our Torah portion, Rashi brings both interpretations. And the interpretation that they sat together in the Beis HaMidrash, he brings it as the second interpretation, not as the first one. Now, it's very interesting, because this is very important to note, that whenever Rashi brings more than one interpretation for something, is because he prefers the first one better. He feels that one is smoother. Second one, he's adding on to add more, to give you more, just in case you're not happy with the first, you have a question, you got the second one. That kind of, but he prefers what seems to be more understandable is his first interpretation. And then, if that's the case, that means that in Parshas Pinchas, by our portion, Rashi is reluctant to say that they sat in the Beis HaMidrash and they asked all them together. If he wasn't reluctant, he would have just stated that as the first interpretation. Rashi puts it as the second interpretation, which means he doesn't really, he's not so comfortable with that interpretation. What is he more comfortable with? Editing the verse, taking the verse and cutting, chopping cut and paste and turn the order around, which obviously, right? You're talking about the Bible, right? You're talking about the Chumash. You're talking about the Torah. You don't really have. No one has been given editing rights over here to sit and chop. Okay, the rabbis knew that sometimes, God gives it us. He's not saying that we should actually rewrite it, but we should read it that way and in a reverse order. But Rashi is more comfortable with that interpretation than than about all of them sitting together in the Beis Medrash. Okay, for whatever reason, let's say Rashi did like that better. Let's say. Then why in Parshas Ba'aloscha doesn't even state the cut and paste, the reordering of it. All he does is say, no, they were sitting together in Beis Medrash. Why in Parshas Ba'aloscha he's so comfortable with that Moshe and Aaron were sitting together and they brought the question to them, that he doesn't, not only does he put that explanation first, he doesn't even bring any other interpretation. That's his only interpretation. When he gets to Parshas Pinchas, Bais, for some reason, he's reluctant to say that they were sitting together in the Beis Medrash and the daughters of Tzelafchad asked the question to all of them. Instead, he'd rather bring the first pirush, which says you have to rearrange the verse and read it that the question was asked not to all of them together. First to the princes, then to Aaron, and then to Moshe. That's his first interpretation. If you don't like that, because you're uncomfortable with messing around with the verse, I'll tell you another interpretation, that it came in front of all of them together when they were sitting in the Beis Medrash. Seems strange. What was so convenient in Parshas Ba'aloscha becomes so unacceptable over here that he totally not acceptable, but it becomes a secondary interpretation. And then in the middle story, Rashi just ignores the whole thing completely. See, most people, when they learn Chumash or when you learn Torah, not even bothered by this. You learn, you go to sleep, you don't lose any sleep over this, whatever. But if you're learning Torah well, and you're engaging in Torah, this is God's word, everything is perfect. You want to understand why, what's the reason, to make the question even stronger. Where does Rashi say we have to edit? Rashi says about editing, Rashi says it in Pinchas. In Ba'aloscha, he doesn't want to do an edit. For some reason, he doesn't like that. Editing, he doesn't like. And we can actually explain why Rashi doesn't like editing, because editing is very not pshat. We all know that when Rashi writes that his preferred method of explaining Torah is the most simplistic meaning. Rashi doesn't like to get into midrashic interpretations that are a little bit far-fetched. Rashi tries to stick to the most simplistic meaning, unless he has no choice. Certain times he has no choice. He has to go and explain a verse a little bit more midrashic, which is less on the simplistic level. So we can understand that editing a verse is not so simple. So, but hold it. How come if Rashi was not comfortable editing a verse in Ba'aloscha, suddenly he is comfortable doing that in Parshas Pinchas and editing the verse? So we have to say that editing the verse, you're only uncomfortable with it if there is another way if there is a better interpretation. But if there isn't a better interpretation, and this is your best interpretation, then you go with that. Right? You see that Rashi does it. It's just when he has no choice, he has to do it. Just like we said earlier, when pshat doesn't work, you got to use midrash. So it seems like in Parshas Pinchas, he has to use the midrashic interpretation because for whatever reason, the pshat of them sitting in the Beis Midrash was not so simple. To Rashi didn't want to use that. So he'd rather use the midrashic interpretation of altering the verse. But in Parshas Ba'aloscha, he so did not want to alter the verse. So now, but here the Rebbe, listen to the question. The Rebbe says, hey, when you go into the tailor and you bought yourself a new pair of pants, sometimes, I hate when this happens. It's like when you buy a suit and you got to do alteration. So there's always the extra charge of the alteration. You got to make a hem, right? The pants is too long, got to hem it. But you pray to God that that the waist, you won't have to do any alterations on the waist. First of all, if they do a waist and alteration, it's an extra $25, right? $30, I don't know, depending on your tailor. So there is a lesser alteration and there is a bigger alteration, right? In Parshas Ba'aloscha, if we need to alterate, if we need to do a tailoring over here, it's a small alteration because there's only two people mentioned, Moshe and Aaron. If we're going to do an alteration and we reverse the order, all we have to do is put Aaron in front of Moshe. So it's a smaller alteration. And therefore, easier to get away with, right? It's a small alteration. In Parshas Pinchas, it says in front of Moshe, in front of Elazar, and in front of the Nesiim, the princes. So if we're going to do an alteration, what do we have to do? We have to make an alteration of 3 names. We have to say the list of 3 are out of order. You got to put the Nesiim. Now you might say it's a little deal. No, it's not a little deal. You're talking about the Torah over here. You're talking about a verse of God's word. So the least you want to mess with it and do an alteration, the better off you are. It's huge. Every word of Torah is bigger than all the worlds. So it's not a little alteration. It's an extra word altering over here. It's a very big deal. And yet, in Parshas Pinchas, when we have to alterate all 3, Rashi signs off on it. No problem. He alterates, and he puts that at his first interpretation is to make an alteration of all 3. But in Parshas Ba'aloscha, when it's a much smaller alteration, he doesn't want to do it. He prefers the pirush that all 3 are sitting in the Beis Medrash and they're learning together. Should I leave? I can shut the class down and let everybody ponder for 24 hours. Come back and see what you got. But I know many of you will not, as we said, won't be able to, will be going crazy. So we have no choice but to finish the class today and see what we got. Okay, so now perhaps we can say. Now, parenthetically, I have to say this because this. Parenthetically, the Rebbe brings, there is another 2 stories in the Torah where there was a question and the people approached the rabbinate to consult. Another 2 stories. And in both stories, it says those other 2 events, they're all in the book of Numbers. And in those stories, it also says in front of Moshe, Elazar, and the Nesiim and the heads of the tribes. And it's interesting, over there Rashi doesn't make any comment. But not only does Rashi not make any comment, even the Midrash doesn't make any comment. The Midrash that does it 3 times, that brings each time the argument, the 2 opinions, in those 2 instances, the Midrash doesn't say anything. The Sefri doesn't say anything. So let's first see and the Rebbe gives a brilliant answer. What are those 2 stories? So both of them are further in the book of Numbers. One of them is when the 2 tribes of Gad and Reuven, which we discussed in a class, what was it? 2 weeks ago. When the tribes of Gad and Reuven asked that they want to get a portion in the land of the eastern side of the Jordan and not cross over into the land of Israel, there as well it says they came in front of Moshe, in front of Elazar, and in front of the Nesiim. And here's another story related to the daughters of Tzelafchad. After God said that when a girl gets an inheritance, if there's no male heir, it goes to the daughter, the families of the tribe of Menashe came with a dilemma, with a challenge. They challenged. What's their challenge? They were afraid the land of Israel was divided to the tribes. That means each tribe had a certain portion. And it was supposed to remain within the tribe. Their question was like this. These girls were actually, at that time, they were not married yet. They were single. So they said like this. These girls are going to come into the land of Israel. They're going to get a land. Piece of land is going to become theirs. Then they are going to get married. If they get married, we don't know who they're going to get married to. They might find husbands from other tribes. When they will have children, now what happens to it? What happens to a mother's piece of land, or when she passes, it goes to her children? To who? To the males. If there is male, okay. Usually, okay, if there's a boy, we'll go to the boy. This boy is not going to be, if these girls marry men from other tribes, not from Menashe, they're from the tribe of Menashe. If they marry a husband from the tribe of Dan, or from the tribe of Reuven, what's going to happen is a piece of land that once belonged to the tribe of Menashe is a generation or two later going to be belonging to a member of the tribe of Reuven, because the tribal designation goes after the father, not after the mother. It's paternal, not maternal. It's going to go after the father. That means that her son is going to be a Reuvenite. And suddenly we're going to have pieces of our tribal land with residents who belong to other tribes having these pieces of land. That was their challenge. It came to Moshe, and God instructed that any girl who was going to get an inheritance should only marry within the tribe. Okay? That was the resolve. In that case as well, it says when they came to challenge, they came to Moshe, Elazar, and the Nesiim, I think it says. Over there is no comment on it. So the Rebbe says, simple. In those cases, the question was really directed only to Moshe. The reason why the Nesiim were there, they did it in front of the Nesiim, they came not as deciders who needed to decide the law, but they came as litigants. They came as partners to the inquiry. Why? Because let's go back to the tribes of Gad and Reuven. They said they don't want to cross the Jordan. They want to stay on this side of the Jordan. They want to get the land over here, the eastern Jordan, the banks of the Jordan River. So that's going to impact the rest of the Jewish people in two ways. Number one, according to the initial understanding, they were not going to join the military campaign. That means that the army is going to lose two tribes. According to their suggestion, at least the way it was understood in the beginning, later they promised that they're going to join the army and the military, they're going to go in to conquer. But initially when they came, they were saying, we're happy over here, we're going to stay over here, and we're going. Moshe admonishes them, rebukes them, and then they say, okay, we can go along. So initially the question, however, was, we're staying over here, and that's it. Comes out that they are defecting from the military, from the army, which means that the only 9 tribes or 10 tribes, whatever, are going to go out and fight the war without 2 major battalions of men and military people. So it comes out that their question is having a ramifications to the rest of the Jewish people. So if that's the case, they were litigants over here. They might come and argue, no, we don't let that. And another thing, not only that, this initial land that was initially conquered on the eastern side of the Jordan was conquered by all the Jewish people. The children of Gad and Reuben wanted that they should get this inheritance. Comes out that they're taking away land that could have belonged to everybody. This land would have been collective land. Their main division would have been on the western side of the Jordan, where they were crossing over the Israel proper. And there would have been each Gad, Reuben, everybody would have gotten there a portion of land. This piece of land would have been a collective land of everybody. What were they asking? That they should get this entire land. So this was a real estate dispute. So the Nesiim, the heads of the tribes who represent the tribes, had to be there as litigants. So over there, it's not It's not a question why they're asking, why they're bringing it in front of Moshe and in front of the Nesiim, because it's not like by the Paschal Lamb when these people are coming for a question, if they can participate, it's a personal question. Of course, later, if the mitzvah is given, they weren't even thinking they're going to get a new mitzvah. They were asking, can we participate? We're impure. We want to participate in the Paschal offering. So it's not, they don't have any litigants over here. It's their question. If so, the question is, why is it being done in front of Aaron? Why is it being done to anybody? Why are they asking anybody else? You ask Moshe, right? That's the question. But in those cases, over there, it's not, and the same is also in the second question, because if these girls are going to take land and start, if girls who don't have a father, if girls who don't have brothers are inheritors of land, then are going to cause land to be stripped from one tribe or relocated or what would be the word? Be switched from tribe to tribe. That's not only applicable to this particular case, because the rule about girls inheriting, even though the daughters of the Tzelafchad were the ones who brought it up, there could have been many other families like that in all other tribes. So the question was a question pertaining to everybody. So the question needed to be in the presence of referring to bringing everybody as part of litigants to this question, as opposed to these stories, which were far more a question that was belonging, at this point at least, the daughters of Tzelafchad, when they were coming at this point, was a question regarding their own land. If that's the case, why do we need Moshe, Aaron? Why is everybody there? Meaning, there is a question why they're presenting the question to the Nesiim, or why they're presenting the question to Elazar, if they're bringing it to Elazar, and that's why we have this whole discussion. It's in these three places, not in those two. Okay, that was just a parenthetical thought. Now let's begin to try to explain the discrepancy in Rashi. And basically, we can make a simple argument. The reason why in Parshas Pinchas, which is in our Torah portion, where the daughters of Tzelafchad are coming, and they're presenting their question, the reason why Rashi is not satisfied initially as the first and preferential interpretation that they were sitting in the Beis HaMedrash is very simple. We can answer. Because I think the first answer the Rebbe wants to give, let me remember. I just want to check this. Give me a second. That the first initial, the first, again, we're not going to the end. We're not going to stay with this, but it would be a very reasonable answer. There's a major difference between the Paschal Lamb, the story by the Paschal Lamb, and by the story of the daughters of Tzelafchad. That by the Paschal Lamb, it says that they brought the question to Moshe and to Aaron. And Rashi says, Kisheshnehem yoshvim bebeis medrash. When both of them, these are the words of Rashi, when both of them were sitting in the Torah, in the study hall. Okay, two people in the study hall makes sense. Two people sitting in the study hall. Study hall can have much more than you go into a big, nice study hall. You can have 100 people in the study hall. You might have 200 people in the study hall. In our verse, in Parshas Pinchas, it says that they came to Moshe, to Aaron, to the Nesiim, in front of the Nesiim, the princes. Okay. All of that we can still say it's in the study hall. And then it says, Kol ha'eda, in front of the entire assembly. which then would imply that everybody, the entire assembly, everybody was in the Beis Medrash. So that would, and that doesn't seem to be, if you visualize it, it means all the Jewish people were in the study hall. How big was the study hall? What does this mean? Like, because it says that they came in front of Moshe, Aaron, V'chol HaNesiim, V'chol HaEdah, and all the assembly. So then, how are you going to say that? Can't say that everybody was in the study hall. Because what kind of study hall was this? Then that all the Jewish people fit into the study hall. You're talking about, let's say, the men that came to study. 600,000 Jews. What kind of study hall was there? Was there such a big study hall? So, okay, this would be an answer. And therefore, when you're reading Rashi, when you're learning Bais, it's hard to say that. Now, again, in the second interpretation, he does say that. And we're going to have to figure out and say, maybe not the entire assembly, a lot of the assembly. We're sitting there and it was quite a big shul, okay, but you can understand that it's less likely that happened. But the first time it says, in front of Moshe and Aaron, it doesn't mention anybody else, okay, they were sitting together in the local yeshiva. All right? Simple answer. You go, and we'll understand why Rashi is fine with giving you the answer, the explanation that they're sitting in the Beis Medrash over here, but not so comfortable by us in Parshas Pinchas. The Rebbe, however, rejects this answer. And he says the reason it's not good, because, number one, if what made the first interpretation problematic, he's going to give you two rejections for it, two refutations for it. Number one, if the reason why Rashi needs to explain the second over here in Parshas Pinchas, a new explanation, that you have to edit the verse, because he doesn't like so much that they're sitting in the Beis Medrash, because it's less likely that they're sitting when they have everybody there. If that's the case, so then this problem becomes already in Parsha Shalach by the story of the wood. The guy was gathering wood on Shabbos. Because over there, it says they came in front of Moshe and Aaron, V'chol HaEdah, and all the assembly. What will we say? What was our original answer? Why does Rashi not say anything over there? Because Rashi is relying on what he explained earlier. In just one portion earlier, Parshas Baloscha, by the Pesach Sheni, it says that, so Rashi is relying that when they brought it, that the same interpretation that works over there works there, but it doesn't work over there. Because in Parshas Baloscha, Rashi just says, in the first, by the Paschal Lamb, by Pesach Sheni, Rashi says they were sitting in the Beis Medrash. And if you're going to argue that the reason why Rashi is not satisfied that they were sitting in the Beis Medrash is because it mentions all the assembly, well, in Parsha Shalach it already mentions all the assembly, and Rashi's quiet, doesn't say anything. So you have to say that for some reason that didn't bother Rashi. That's number one. Why it's hard to say that was the entire problem in Parshas Pinchas, that Rashi had to give a new interpretation. Secondly, the Rebbe points out something interesting. In the book of Exodus, Parshas Ki Sisa, which over there talks about the breaking of the tablets, the golden calf, that whole story. In the beginning, it says that after the golden calf, it says how the people would come and Moshe put his tent outside of the camp, and anybody that came to seek counsel from God, they would come out to the tent. So over there, Rashi, I think it was over there, Rashi gives an explanation of the order of how they taught Torah in the desert, how Moshe taught Torah in the desert. And Rashi says over there, Kate said Seder HaMishnah. What's the order of Mishnah? First Moshe would teach. That means Moshe would go to the Beis Medrash, to the study hall. And he would teach who? He would teach it to Aaron. Then Aaron would get the first lesson. Aaron would sit down to the right side of Moshe. Aaron's children would come in. Aaron had 4 sons in the beginning, then 2 of them died, 2 left. They would come in front, and Moshe would repeat it a second time. So now Aaron is hearing it twice, and his sons are hearing it for the first time. When he finished the lesson, repeating the second time, all the Zekanim, all the elders came in, 70 elders. They sat down, and Moshe Rabbeinu taught it a third time. So Aaron heard it once, his sons here heard it twice, and the Zekanim hear it for the first time. Then Rashi says, Nichnesu kol ha'am, the entire people came in. And Moshe taught for everybody. So first of all, Rashi seems to be implying very, very much that for some reason they had a big Beis Medrash. They had a very, very big study hall where all the people can come and study. Nichnesu kol ha'am. The words Rashi uses, everybody came in. So obviously, whatever you're going to explain over there, whatever that means that there was no problem in saying that the Beis HaMedrash can facilitate so many people. Because Rashi says specifically over there that the order, and Rashi doesn't say just happened once. Sometimes you say a lot of people fit into a small place. It was a miracle. We had that miracle actually happening in the temple. No. This was the order. This is the way it always happened. Moshe would teach a lesson. Everybody would go in. So you see clearly that kol ha'am is no problem. Or we can say that we don't have to imagine that the Beis HaMedrash, the study hall, was humongous, was a stadium. You don't have to. Yeah, how big is a stadium for 600,000 people? Which stadium holds 600,000 people? Think about it. I don't know. I don't know how many people go into a stadium. I think a big stadium holds, what is it? 70, 80,000 people, 100,000, a stadium, a ballpark. How big are these stadiums, right? So this would be 600,000 people, right? If you don't want to imagine it was such a big crowd, you can still explain that when it says Nichnesu kol ha'am, all the people came in, it doesn't mean that everybody came to learn. What does it mean? Those who are interested in learning. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking, you think, all the people in the desert, everybody was learning Torah. They're the same. It's the same story like it is today. Some people like learning and they come and they learn. Moshe's teaching, they came. Those who like to stand, what do you think most people were doing in the Midbar? A lot of people. They hung outside. They had nothing to do. There was no work. They sat and they spoke about everything under the sun. I don't know. I had this image today of them while I was learning this. They're sitting and eating sunflower seeds. I don't know. Jerusalem. That's the people who are not working, don't know what they stand in the corners, talk politics, and spit sunflower seeds. So in the desert, they were eating, like in Yiddish you say papitis. And who went to learn? Whoever was studious went to learn. So not everybody came. So a couple of thousand people came. And they came and they learned. And they were in the Beis Medrash. But what do you see from here? But again, that kol ha'am doesn't mean literally everybody. If so, when it says over here by us, kol ha'eda, that all the assembly, doesn't mean everybody. It means whoever comes. If so, then over here it can also mean they're sitting in the Beis Medrash. They came in front of Moshe, Elazar, the Nesiim, and all the assembly. They were sitting in the Beis Medrash. Yet, as we said before, Rashi doesn't, again, he does give the commentary, he does say, but he gives it second. Which means his first comment is, for some reason, he doesn't like this. He'd rather rearrange the verse. He's reluctant to say it was why? We're saying the reason is because over here it says, Kol ha'eda, and in Baloscha doesn't. So over there he says it's okay that they came in the Beis Medrash, but over here it's not okay they came to the Beis Medrash, because then why is everybody doing that? But if we say that everybody's not everybody, especially, and here's the clincher, especially since Rashi explained already in the past, in addition to saying that the Beis Medrash, Kol everybody can come into the Beis Medrash. But in addition to that, specifically when it doesn't use, over here, it doesn't use the word it uses the word Ada. And Rashi says in more than one place that when it says assembly, it means the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin means the rabbis, those who were the judges. That's the Sanhedrin, the lawgivers. So if that's the case, of course they can fit into the Beis Medrash. It was Sanhedrin. It wasn't everybody. Kala Eda. So therefore, just to think we can get, to accept that the reason why it's hard to say over here that it means, the reason why it's hard to say over here because you have so many people in the Beis Medrash, doesn't really work. Because it's not that many people. We do find that everybody was able to come into the Beis Medrash. If so, let's assume that as the answer. Why have to alter the verse? Okay, so now perhaps let's try one more spin on it. Again, what we're trying to understand, just to be clarified, is why in our story over here by the daughters of Tzelafchad bringing their question, why we are less inclined to say that the question was presented to all of them together in the Beis Medrash. Why? Because in Baloscha, Rashi says that as the only explanation, and in Parshas Pinchas, Rashi only says that as a second interpretation. And why is that? So, perhaps we can give another answer. And that is, there's one more important word that we read before in our story, but we did not read it slowly and emphasize it. In our pasuk, it says, actually, where this all happened. It says, "Vatamodno lifnei Moshe." They stood in front of Moshe, lifnei Elazar HaKohen, in front of Elazar the Kohen, v'lifnei Anasim, in front of the princes, v'chola Eda, and the entire assembly. Where Pesach Oel Moed, by the entrance of the tent of meeting. Now it doesn't say that in Parshas Baloscha. But Parshas Baloscha says, "Vayakrivu lifnei Moshe lifnei Aharon bayom hahu." They came in front of Moshe and Aaron bayom hahu. Bingo, that's the answer. In Parshas Baloscha, it doesn't say where, so they were in the Beis Medrash. But over here, it says they were in the study hall. But here it says that they were Pesach Oel Moed. It tells you exactly where they were. At the entrance of the Oel Moed. The entrance of the Oel Moed is not the Beis Medrash. So therefore, you can't say over here that they were sitting in the Beis Medrash in the study hall, because it says it was at the entrance of the Oel Moed. No, pretty simple. So therefore, you'd rather rearrange the verse. However, if you're not comfortable with rearranging the verse and saying that they asked them first, you have to go reverse order, then I can say that it was the Beis Medrash. Maybe the Beis Medrash was next to the Oel Moed. Like you can kind of like reluctantly still go back to the earlier answer that they were in the Beis Medrash. But it's hard. It's much harder because it says over here Pesach Oel Moed. Or the question is, how can you even say it as a second interpretation? It says Pesach Oel Moed. Oh, you can answer. In other words, it's not smooth, but you could technically get away with it and say like this. You have to divide the verse in two parts. They came in front of Moshe and in front of Elazar HaKohen and in front of the Nesiim. Where too? That was in the Beis Medrash. And V'chola Eda Pesach Oel Moed and the assembly were standing at the entrance of the Oel Moed, because that was an open space and everybody's standing there. And then there was this indoor area where is the Beis Medrash, the study hall, and Moshe and Aaron and the Nesiim were all inside and they were there. So you could answer it, but it's not so smooth over here because it says Pesach Oel Moed. That's why Rashi doesn't want to say this as the first interpretation, because it tells you it was Pesach Oel Moed. The reason the Rebbe doesn't accept this, again with a brilliant answer. You see, when you have the entire Torah in front of your eyes, literally alive, then you see things that we rest of us don't see. Rashi explicitly stated in the book of Exodus, in the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim, the parsha that deals with the laws right after the giving of the 10 Commandments, Rashi says that we derive from a verse, and Rashi brings it. That what? Why is Parshas Mishpatim? Why is the Torah portion all about litigation laws, financial transactions, and that kind of stuff, and litigation, and so on and so forth? Why is that put right after the mitzvah of making a mizbeach, an altar? In the end of Parshas Yisro, right after the giving of the Torah tells us the mitzvah of an altar. It says over there that you're not allowed to go up on steps to my altar. You have to have a ramp, whatever. But there is a mitzvah about the altar, a commandment about the altar. What does the altar have to do with the litigation? So Rashi says from here we derive a very important law, that the judiciary element of the Jewish people, the high court, is supposed to be in the temple or next to the temple. Shetasim Sanhedrin, Eitzelam Mizbeach. You're supposed to put, again, those who litigate the law should be next to the altar. And so it wasn't that the Rebbe says that in these days, the Rebbe encourages very much that we should all study the laws of the Beis HaMikdash. So if you learn the laws of the Holy Temple, you read about it, you find out that the Holy Temple wasn't just a place where they sacrificed their sacrifices and they came to worship. It was also the place where the judiciary unit, if you can say, of the Jewish people, the Sanhedrin, they held court in the temple. They had a room in the outside courtyard, or actually in the inside, whatever. There's a certain part of it they were allowed to sit, certain part you're not allowed to sit, whatever. It's a whole thing, but it was in the temple because you're supposed to put Sanhedrin in the temple. If so, the whole answer it falls away. What do we want to say? Since it says Pesach Olam Moed over here, and therefore it can't be in the Beis Medrash because the Beis Medrash is not Pesach Olam Moed. Who says the Beis Medrash is not Pesach Olam Moed? That's exactly where the Beis Medrash is. The study hall is exactly there because that's where the rabbis have to sit. That was the study hall where the rabbis were sitting, and that is exactly Pesach Olam Moed. Therefore, the answer doesn't cover. So we're back to the question. Why is it that in Parshas, by the Paschal Lamb, we are comfortable with the answer that they were sitting in the Beis Medrash and the question was asked to them together, and in Parshas Pinchas, we're not comfortable with it? Hey, we tried a whole bunch of, or we're not so comfortable with it. We tried a whole bunch of ways to resolve it, and we're still not there. So watch the mind-blowing genius of what the Rebbe does come up with, of what the answer is. Well, what I love about it is that it's such a it's like, I don't know. I'll let you enjoy it on your own and see the brilliance of it. So the Rebbe says, no. Just first, let's take a look a little bit over here. It seems that Rashi, or not just Rashi, the rabbis, everybody, they seem to feel very much that this question wasn't just asked in front of everybody, but it was actually directed to the people mentioned. In other words, in Parshas Ba'aloscha, when they asked the question, it wasn't only asked in front of Moshe and in front of Aaron, but it was actually presented to Moshe and to Aaron. By us, when it says they came to Moshe, the Elazar, and the Nesiim, it's not just that the question was asked and they were present, but that the question was asked of them. And that remains. We never we never changed that. We accept that this was a question that was asked to all of them. The only thing that Rashi and the rabbis have rejected is the implication of the verse that seems to imply that they asked it first to Moshe, then to Aaron, and then, or in that case, or over here, first to Moshe, then to Aaron, and then to the Nasi. The order. And we'll say either it was the reverse order, first to the Nesiim, then to Allah. That's according to the first interpretation over here by us, that the reverse order. Or we will say that they asked them to all of them. But even when they asked it to all of them, they were presenting the question. They meant to ask all of them, not just to Moshe. And that remains when we say Bebeis HaMedrash or Yoshua and they ask the question, well, we're not negating that, oh, it happens to be other people were there. You know, and the janitor was also there cleaning up the coffee cups. That's not what it is. It happened to be other people were there. It's that the question was actually posed to everybody. And according to every interpretation, we will learn that. If we reverse the verse, if we edit the verse, for sure it was that. That's what we're saying. First they presented it in the Nesiim, then they presented it to Aaron or to Elazar, and then they presented it to Moshe. But even if we say that to the Beis HaMedrash they were sitting, it's not just a question that was dropped in front of Moshe and there were others that were eavesdropping in the conversation, in the whole thing, but they actually presented the question to all of them. Although maybe it was done in one shot, but it was to all of them. Now, why would we say that? Like, what's forcing us to say that? So the Rebbe says what's forcing us to say that is the wording of the verse. Both places, by Parshas Ba'aloscha, Parshas Pinchas, and actually in the third place as well, which we spoke earlier, we're going to get to that later. It doesn't say they came Lifnei Moshe ve'Aaron. They came to Moshe and Aaron. Or it doesn't say by us, Vayakrivu, here it is, Vatemandu, Vatamoidnu Lifnei Moshe ve'Elazar HaKohen. Ve means and, ve'Nesiim and the Nesiim. If it would say the, you can say, oh yeah, okay. They asked the question to Moshe, but Moshe was then flanked and surrounded by Aaron was sitting next to him, or in our case, Elazar the Nesiim. So it was in the presence of everybody. Since they're important people, we'll mention them. We'll give them honor. It's not like, you know, there's a janitor cleaning up and he's also there, and we're not mentioning him. Okay, we're mentioning those that are important. Fine. If it would say a the, which means and, that would be okay. The verse says, they asked the question, Lifnei Moshe, in front of Moshe, the Lifnei Elazar, and in front of Elazar, the Lifnei HaNesiim, and in front of the Nesiim. That's the key. It says Lifnei. The fact that it's presenting it as Lifnei is implying that the question was presented in front of him, and in front, which means they were seeking the answer from each one of them. And you have that over here, and you have that also. Let's go back to Ba'aloscha. Vayakrivu lifnei Moshe v'lifnei Aaron. So that is an implication that the question was addressed to all of them. But why would they, why would you do that? You have Moshe there. Why are you doing that? Now the question becomes like, if you're already asking Moshe, so if you're going to learn the reverse order, no problem. They went first to the lowest authority. That's why they present. They didn't know. Went to the next authority. He didn't know. Went to a higher. The question was brought to the Supreme Court. This president came all the way up. But if we're going to say that they're sitting in the Beis Medrash and they're all together, so I understand, You're not making everybody leave the room. You let them stay there. So the question is asked in the presence of everybody. But why were they directing the question to everybody? So the Rebbe says, listen to this, is genius. He says that's why the emphasis over here is that they asked it in Beis HaMedrash, in the study hall. Study hall is not just a location. Study hall represents a method of a certain system. If I have a question in Torah, usually if any question or anybody has a question, you go to the rabbi's door, you call the rabbi, 1-800-RABBI. You call your local Orthodox rabbi if you want a Torah answer, and you ask him the question. You're presenting the question to a rabbi. The rabbi is that person. Sometimes you'll even go to a Beis Din. You have a question, you go to a court, and you present your challenge, your question to the court. There is a different thing called a study hall. What's a study hall? A study hall is a place where people engage in halachic discussion. It's not a place where a download of rabbinic authoritative teaching is being taught. It's not a dictator. It's not someone dictating it's where analysis takes place, where discussion takes place. Now, even though a Beis Medrash, a study hall, used to have a Rosh Hashiva, which the Rosh Hashiva meant that he was the head of the study hall. He was the leader, right? And if we need to decide if someone gets expelled, or if we need to decide if someone gets accepted, or we need to decide who sits in the front, and he's in charge. Fine, there has to be. And someone who sets the discussion, who will, like you say, the Speaker of the House, he sets the mode of what is going to be on the agenda. What are we going to talk about? But think about it, just like in the Senate and in the Congress. It's not just a place where one person gets up and hands down the law. The law it's a place of discussion. It's debated. Everybody's talking about it together. That's the concept of the Beis HaMedrash. So when it says in many places is in Talmud, you always find it, what was going on in the Beis HaMedrash today? It meant what was the subject that the people were tackling. And everybody who's in the Beis HaMedrash has a right to offer their opinion. It's not like, oh, Moshe's here, no one says. It's a different setting. If you're knocking on Moshe's door and you're coming to ask him as a rabbi a question, Moshe is giving his answer, it's authoritative answer. If you present the question in the Beis HaMedrash, it means you're seeking to start a Torah debate and a discussion amongst those that are expounding on the Torah. And everybody has a right, even if you're with Moshe, to offer your opinion. And there will be questions, there will be answers, there will be back and forth. Maybe Moshe will offer what he thinks, others will offer what they're thinking. It's a discussion. It's a whole different setting. Now, since over here it says, let's go in Parshas Bahaloscha. It says that when they had a question about the Paschal lamb, they were impure, and they had a question if they can somehow figure out a way how to do it. They didn't go knocking on the Moshe as a rabbi's door. They went to the Beis HaMedrash. They knew there's a place where they study Torah. They have a new question. They want the thing to be debated. They want people maybe to come up with solutions. They brought the question to the Beis HaMedrash. Who's in the Beis HaMedrash? Moshe and Aaron at that time. So they presented the question to Moshe and are not from the perspective of looking for the chief rabbi to give a halachic ruling, but to create a discussion in the Beis Medrash. Let's see what they'll come out. And in that sense, Moshe and Aaron are equal. They're discussing. Maybe they debated for a while. They didn't know. Then Moshe goes to get the word of God and come back with an answer. Fine. But the presentation was, and it makes sense. And that's why it says, Lifnei Moshe v'lifnei Aaron, in front of both. Because it wasn't that they asked Moshe first and then Aaron. They delivered the question, intending the question to go to both, because it was a Beis Medrash setting. I love it. It was a Beis Medrash setting, so the question was presented like this. Okay, this is very good in Parshas Balos. Come to Parshas Pinchas. You can say the same thing. The daughters of Tzelafchad say, we got a great debate. We're gonna stir up the pot today in the study hall. We're gonna bring a question. There is no son heirs. There's only girls. What's gonna happen over here? The girls, the daughters of Tzelafchad, stormed the Beis Medrash. And, hence, my title worked. I like it. So they stormed it. What am I saying? They stormed. They're not protesting. They're not coming for. They do want to stir up the pot. They do want to bring a discussion in the Beis Medrash. Let's say that. But we have a problem. We can't say that. Why? Because when we read the verse, it says, it says Pesach Ol Moed, in front of the tent of meeting. That's the spoiler. These words, in front of the tent of meeting, is a spoiler. Why is it a spoiler? Because it says where it is. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's where the Beis Medrash is. No, we said earlier, aren't you supposed to put the Beis Medrash, the place where they sit and study in front of the tent? Yeah, you're right. But if it says it was in the front of the tent of meeting, the front of the entrance to the tent of meeting is the assembly place. It's the place where everybody who is seeking to come and hear the word of God would come. That's the place where Moshe, the leader of the Jewish people, would have a podium, and he would deliver instructions. He would deliver divine. He would give a download. He would give an authoritative speech. It's not a study hall. Now, you might say technically the study hall was there. Yeah, but if technically the study hall was there, why is the verse emphasizing it was Pesach Oel Moed? The very notion that the verse says it was Pesach Oel Moed means that this was not a question that was being sought to create a debate discussion. The question was brought Pesach Oel Moed because they wanted to hear the word of God. They weren't interested in a debate. They weren't interested in the scholarly discussion. They just wanted to know what is the law. If they would have wanted a scholarly discussion, to present a new Torah inquiry to the Beis Medrash so that the rabbis can debate it and come up with a genius answer or whatever of way to do it, then it wouldn't say in the verse Pesach Ol Moed. It would say they came to the people, and maybe it would say Le Beis HaMedrash, and if it doesn't say Beis HaMedrash, just leave it blank. The emphasis of Pesach Ol Moed, it's a different vibe. That's what we're saying. Beis Medrash is one kind of vibe, and Pesach Ol Moed is a whole different vibe. What's the vibe of Pesach Ol Moed? You're coming to hear, not to debate. You're coming to hear what's the verdict. What does God say on the subject? That's the reason why Rashi over here did not like, was not comfortable with the answer. That this was a Beis Medrash type, this was a study hall inquiry. However, if it's not a study hall inquiry, why are they asking Moshe and in front of Elazar and in front of the Nesiim? That doesn't make any sense. If they're seeking just tell me the rule, don't debate, I'm not looking for a debate, then once you go to the Supreme Justice, the Supreme Court, why are you going to a lower court? Once you go to Moshe, there's no point to go to anybody else. And we don't want to answer it was a Beis Medrash because we have a problem with the word Pesach Ol Moed, which implies a different vibe. So we have no other solution, Rashi says, but to say that they first approached the Nesiim, the heads of the tribes, with their halachic question, which is something you would go do at the Pesach Moed. You're going to go to get a place where people assemble to get directions, to be told the law. So you're going there to inquire. First, they went and they asked the Nesiim. The Nesiim didn't know, so they went to Elazar, the high priest. Elazar didn't know, they went to Moshe. So we'll both understand why it says Pesach Ol Moed, because that was the place of assembly. And why it says in front, because actually the question was asked to all three, but not in the order that it's stated in the verse, and in a reverse order. And we much rather do that over here than to say that this wasn't the Beis Medrash, because the vibe doesn't feel like it was Beis Medrash. Now, if you're allergic, now Rashi says like this, if you're allergic to tampering with the verse, I understand you. If you really don't like that because it irks you that we're tampering with the verse, okay. So then I have no other choice, tell you that this happened in the Beis Medrash. And when it says Pesach Ol Moed, we will then say that maybe, and here's where the answer, which I told earlier, when they came, they really came to Moshe, Aaron, and the Nesiim in the Beis Medrash to present a debate question, they asked the question to everybody, intending everybody for this to be a new discussion in the Beis Medrash. However, why does it say Pesach Ol Moed at the entrance of the Ol Moed, emphasizing more looking for a finite halachic authority, not for a debate? That's not because of the doors of Tzelafchad and because of the rabbis. That's because when they were coming, people heard already. They're girls, they're women. They spoke about it. They didn't just have a question. They talked to their neighbors, and the neighbors spoke to their neighbors. Before you know it, everybody heard that there was a new question, and they're saying, oh, we're going to go to Moshe. All people were interested. It was a very, very, very male world. It was a very, very masculine world. All inheritance always came down to boys. Girls were very much, at that time, very much in the shadow. Here there are these aggressive girls, these feminist girls, these girls who are gonna ask for their rights, ask to be recognized as heirs. So other people, everybody was interested. So this became something that everybody can. It says Kol Ha'eda, and it's interesting when it says V'Kol Ha'eda, doesn't say Lifnei Ha'eda. It doesn't say in front of the Eda. The Eda, the assembly came along. They came along and they stood where Pesach Ol Moed, which is the place for gathering, where they stood outside the Beis Medrash to wait till the discussions of the Beis Medrash are over, and then at the end they'll hand down a law. Now, there's two parts over here. There is the way this is going to be dealt with is in a Beis Medrash setting. It's going to be dealt with as a discussion in the basement where everybody has a say and it's going to be debated. That's going to be the way it's dealt. But then the actual final law is going to be delivered to the assembly that's standing Pesach Ol Moed. That's how we're going to have to learn. However, it's not so comfortable because you're dividing the verse. You're having to whatever. You can feel that it's not so smooth. That's why Rashi doesn't want to put this as the initial interpretation. He leaves it only if you're very irritated with rearranging the verse. In other words, it's a secondary interpretation. And now we'll understand for a moment why, when Rashi brings these two interpretations, again, it's so beautiful. In Parshas Bamidbar, in Parshas Ba'aloscha, the Paschal Lamb, over there we don't even have to. There it's simple. Since it doesn't say Pesach Ol Moed in front of the Ol Moed, over there it's easy and it's very, very smooth to say that the question was directed to Moshe and to Aaron because it was presented as a Beis HaMedrash study hall question. That they were coming to bring a new shaila in the Beis Medrash. Can you debate this subject? By us in Parshas Pinchas, since over here it says Pesach Ol Moed, which implies a different vibe, it's hard to say this, and we'd rather say the first interpretation. Now, why? Now, the first interpretation is also not comfortable. Why? Because you're chopping up a verse. You're editing a verse of the Torah. So each interpretation has its flaw. Why does Rashi put then the editing first, and then he puts the interpretation? Because the Rebbe says like this, very interesting. According to the first interpretation, the entire verse, the verse itself, is not choppy. The verse itself is very fits. What happened? They came first to the prophet, first to the princes, then they came to Aaron, to Elazar, then they came to Moshe. And what kind of inquiry was it? Pesach Ol Moed. It was a type of inquiry where people come to seek the final, hand down, tell me what the verdict is. Everything is smooth. The only thing that's not good is that you have to reverse the actual order. So you're doing an edit in the order, but the rest of it, the general gist of the verse is very smooth. Rashi felt that is preferable. Second interpretation, although you're going to keep the actual order of the words straight, but the energy of the verse, the underlying current of the word doesn't fit. Because if it would be a Beis Medrash question, why is it saying that it happened? Pesach Olam. Now again, the question is not technically where did it happen. It happened Pesach because that's where the shul was. That's where the Beis Medrash was. But the fact that the Torah says Pesach Olam Moed is saying more about the type of inquiry, not so much technically the address, but the type of inquiry where it was. It was seeking the word of God. It wasn't seeking earthly human debate. If it would be human debate, holy Torah debate, but human debate, it would have been not emphasized that it's Pesach Olam Moed, the in front of the tent of meeting where the word of God comes down. The Rebbe says that's why Rashi also doesn't only say both interpretations, he also says their names, Rebbe Yashia and Abba Hanan, because you see in Torah, in many other places, that Rabbi Yashia likes to stick to the general gist of a verse, and he would rather make edits in the verse itself as long as you're staying consistent with the certain notion of the verse, with the general gist of the verse. And Abba Hanan, and the Rebbe says it's in other places, we're not going to get into it right now, you find is very, very uncomfortable with changing words in a verse, changing the order, and he'd rather learn an interpretation that is inconsistent with the general meaning, as long as you don't have to edit the actual verse. So each one of them is actually staying on their own lane. Yeshayahu follows. See, different rabbis had different methods that what they felt is more important when they studied Torah, what was more in sync with the way they understood. Because there's many ways of interpreting Torah. So Rashi brings their names because by knowing their style, it makes sense while Rabbi Yashia says it's okay to edit the verse because it keeps the verse itself intact. And Rabbi Abichana says, no, I very much don't want to change the words, even if we have to shake up a little bit the energy of the verse. Okay. Leaves us finally with the one question by Rashi. Why Rashi didn't say anything based on what we just said. This is so brilliant. Why Rashi didn't say anything by the wood collector. Rashi totally ignored the whole thing. Not because he was relying, but let's see. The Rebbe says that when you look at the verse by the wood collector, when they came in front of Moshe and Aaron and in front of the assembly, over there the whole question doesn't even start to begin with. Why? The whole question is as follows. Again, you know what I love about this? What I love about this is the only way you can give these interpretations is if you're visualizing it. If you think about it, these ideas only come to your head if you have a full visualization of the event. You see it happening. It's as if you're living in the daughters of Tzalaf. Then you can realize, oh, this is a Beis Medrash, this is a debate, that's when you get the vibe. Suddenly the Torah comes to, that's what I love, the Rebbe, when he learns, he's so in it. He's like living 3,000 years ago in the story. So, and you'll see it over here as well. He says the whole problem with the people going, why do we have a problem with saying Moshe first and then Aaron? Because if you have an halachic inquiry, why in the world would you go first to Moshe and then to Aaron? That right? Moshe is the ultimate halachic authority. Right? But the Rebbe says in the story of the collectors of the wood, it doesn't even begin to be a problem. You know why? Over here, it wasn't so much a halachic inquiry. Well, let's read what it says. There was a man who was collecting wood, and he got caught, got busted. Those who saw him, found him, gathering wood, they brought him to Moshe, to Aaron, Velkola Eda, and to the tire. They brought the person. Now, why did they bring him? Rashi says, why did they bring him? So Rashi says, they knew that the Makoshesh Eitzim has to die, gets capital, but they didn't know which one. They didn't know what exactly. There's stoning, there is a strangulation. There's different things. The Torah has 4 methods. They didn't know which one applies. So they came to Moshe. So there was for sure a halachic question here. That's why they had to come to Moshe. But there was something else over here. Since they knew this person has to die, this person needs to be brought and handed over to the authorities who are going to execute this individual. In other words, he has to be given over to those in charge. So when they brought him to Moshe, to Aaron, and to Kol Eda, again, they're witnesses. They're just 2 people. This guy they caught. So they took hold of him. They said, you're coming with me. One grabbed him under the arm, the other one grabbed the other one. They're bringing him to give him over. So since they're giving him over to the authorities over here, so to Moshe, to Aaron, and to Kol Eda, to the entire assembly. So we understand why they're bringing him to Moshe. If it would just be a halachic inquiry, good. Once you're asking Moshe, there's no point of asking Aaron. But over there, it's not even a question, because over here you can see that there was something else in this encounter with this person, and bringing him to Moshe, Aaron, and Kol Eda is because Moshe is not going to put the handcuffs on him. And you'll say Aaron isn't either going to do that. But Aaron, you're bringing him to the authoritative figures, those who are in charge, Kol Eda, and they're going to now, Moshe, they need to ask the halacha, which means which one they're going to do. But the others is kind of the chain of command to take hold of this individual and do what they were going to do to him. And it says they put him right away. It says they put him in the prison. They locked him up until they found out. Till Moshe can give them the answer. And actually, Moshe didn't even know. Moshe still needed to receive from God how they would execute it. God then speaks to Moshe. So they brought him so that he can then be. It's almost like they brought him to the police station for him to be processed. To Moshe, to Aaron, and to the assembly to process this guy, to process his arrest. They were just 2 individuals. So there is no question over here. So Rashi doesn't say anything. Okay. And with this, by the way, we'll also understand something else. Just briefly, because we learned this is so beautiful. This explains so many things in the Torah. There was another person who was the Torah relate. This is in the book of Leviticus, in Parshat Emor. Over there it discusses another person that needed to be put to death, and over there it was for blasphemy. And there it says that the witnesses came, and they brought, and it says over there they came to Moshe. They came to Moshe. It doesn't say Aaron, it doesn't say the assembly. They came to Moshe. Why over there, does it say they came to Moshe? So the Rebbe explains Because over there, it was just a halachic acquiring. There was no why? Because they over the, Rashi says that over there they didn't even know what the law of someone who this person was said the opposite of a blessing to God. He said God's name and he did the opposite of a blessing. So this person they didn't know yet what the law is. It was never told to them that if someone does that, they should be put to death. So there's no point yet of arresting him and bringing him. They just heard about it. They went to ask Moshe. They heard blasphemy. A guy say that. What do they do? So who do they go to? They only go to the halakha. It's only a halachic question. So they went to Moshe. Doesn't even mention Aaron. Why? Because over there, for sure, it seems like they weren't going to spark a debate in the basement. They just wanted to know what the law is. So who do you go to? Do you go to Moshe? In our case over here, by the wood gatherer, since they knew for sure that he's put there, so they right away brought him to court. He was under arrest. They brought him to process him. And they also had a halachic question. Okay, so that they asked Moshe. Okay, this answers everything. Now we're just going to explain a little bit on the Hasidic end, which means a little bit on the deeper side. The difference of Bahaloscha and Pinchas by the Paschal Lamb and the daughters of Tzelafchad. Now we're going to get a little bit more into the deeper energy of it, and why over here Rashi says the explanation that they were sitting in the Beis HaMedrash, they were in the study hall, and here Rashi brings both interpretations. One is to rearrange the verse, and the other one is to say that they asked them, all of them together. Why is that? And as a second interpretation. Brilliant. So the Rebbe says like this. In both stories, in the Paschal Lamb and in the Benot Tzelafchad, they share a common theme. These are both mitzvot of the Torah, commandments of the Torah, that were initiated not by God, but by humans. We said this earlier, all the mitzvot of the Torah are coming from God to us. These are two mitzvot, which at least, I'm not saying we caused them or made them up. We definitely didn't make it up. God gave them. But it could be these, and we're going to see that it could be there was an intention of God to give those mitzvahs. But bottom line, the way these mitzvahs were downloaded to us was through a stimulation from below. This Paschal Lamb and the inheritance to girls. As God gave the laws of inheritance originally, it was only males. It was the girl part that it goes to women, female inheritance, was initiated by these women. Just like the second Korban Pesach, the Pesach Sheni, the second, was also initiated by people. And therefore, what does this do? These are two mitzvot that emphasize the human participation, our human participation in engaging God and development of Torah. That God allows us to participate and bring forth and, in a sense, create novelty in Torah, which is huge. Even though Torah is divine, yet there is a certain engagement and an involvement with us in both these cases. That's the reason why. And by the way, it has to do with the character. The Rebbe says it has to do with the character of these two particular cases. Not just random, happens to be two things that it has to do with the character. Pesach Sheni, the Paschal Lamb, is an element of tshuva, repentance. Impurity, being far away. There's a spiritual meaning to that. Being impure means not just technically you got contaminated with a dead person. It means not being in a spiritual state that you can offer the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. Or being in a distant place means you're not in the right place. Your head is not in the right, the heart is not in the right, being far away. So this whole cry, why should we be lacking, is really the cry of the penitent. It's the Baal Tshuva. Now, tshuva, repentance, is a rising energy from below. Repentance is not coming from God to us. Repentance is the person turning to God. It's elevating us to Hashem. It's we seeking to climb up to Him, not God coming down to us. It's not a download, it's an upload. That's why the mitzvah itself came in a way that it came from us. Now, inheritance for girls, the difference between male and female is that masculine energy flows from up down, tradition, father, son. That's a certain masculine energy. Women energy is more of a spiritually. Women represent earth rising as opposed to heaven descending. It's the refinement of the world. It's the elevation of things. I'm not going to get into that right now, but that is the difference between, in both these cases, there is a certain element of earthly participation and elevation. That's why these are the two mitzvot that come from below. Now, these two methods of explaining this particular verse are both methods that emphasize, in both answers that Rashi gives of how we're going to explain these verses over here, both the methods are methods that highlight human participation. Let's see why. The interpretation that we have to cut and paste, we have to rearrange the verse. What is that telling you? There is a verse in the Torah, a holy word. In other words, it's written in the Torah the way God dictated to Moshe. And then we have the nerve to come along and say, no, it's written like this, but you're supposed to be really sarsu, mess with the verse, put this first, put that second. What does that show? That is indicating our muscle. That we have muscles as well. We have a say in the Torah as well. So much so it can be written one way, and we have the right we're given, God granted us that ability, to the rabbis, to the Torah scholars, to say, okay, this verse, from all the verses, we gotta move what's in the front to the back, to the back to the front. That shows the power of the recipient, the power of the Jewish people. That's in that method. The second thing is, we said earlier, that the second interpretation is that they were sitting in the Bais HaMedrash, they were sitting in the study hall, and they were discussing. And we said that type of Torah study is one that involves debate, and everybody has an opinion. It's not only the rabbi, it's not only the leader, it's not only the Moshe, it's not only the Rosh Hashiva, the head of not only the dean, everybody has a say. What is that emphasizing? The whole concept of Bais HaMedrash study hall learning, means exactly that we are the ones who expound, study, learn. Sages even say there is no such a thing as a Bais Medrash, which means a day of study in the yeshiva that there isn't a novel thought. Ein Bais Medrash beloy chidush. Every study, every session of Bais HaMedrash produces something new. And that new production is something that came out from the debate. Not a handed down tradition from God from above, but unearthed from below. Bais HaMedrash study is unearthing from us. It's our innovation. It's our pumping. Very different than going to the Ohel Moed, standing silently, your eyes closed. Moses is handing over and dictating from above. That's great. That's God downloading from above. But that's not Bais HaMedrash. Bais HaMedrash is activity from below, engagement from below. So the Rebbe says it makes perfectly sense that these two Rashi interpretations, or the Sifri's both explanations on these two subjects, it's either that we rearrange the verse, or is it that this was a discussion in the Bais HaMedrash? It fits very well with the vibe of these two mitzvot, These two mitzvot are mitzvahs that engage. The whole mitzvah came about through an engagement from below. So the way it was brought about, not only the mitzvah, but the actual, the method of it, the way we learn it, the way we study it, the way we read these verses, is either we're given authority to rearrange a verse, which means not to keep the verse exactly like it came to us from above, but to rearrange the verse, or we're given the authority to actually have novel interpretation, to discuss and to bring up our ideas. Obviously, our ideas of what it says in the Torah, but still our ideas. And now the Rebbe says, so now we'll understand why in Bahaloscha there is more emphasis on the Beis Medrash one, because that's the only interpretation Rashi gives, besides for the explanation we said earlier. And in our story of Benos Tzelafchad, the daughters of Tzelafchad, there is more emphasis on rearranging the verse. Beis Medrash is there as well, but as a secondary interpretation. More emphasis on. Because the Rebbe says the difference is to what degree are we effective? To how much is our novelty over here? How strong is our chidush? How strong is our innovation? In which one of these methods emphasize more that it's coming from us as opposed to being dictated from above? So he says like this: rearranging a verse sounds like major incursion, so to speak, a major incursion into the Torah that they were actually, and in a sense, it's like, wow, that you have the power to do that. But in a sense, it's less human. Why? Because the verse itself came from God. What you're doing is you're saying, okay, it's written like this, but it has to be read like this. So you're making an alteration, as we discussed earlier. But the actual suit was tailored by God. You're altering it, fine. That is showing power from below, but only to a certain degree. Beis HaMedrash is that we're the ones tailoring the entire suit. We're not just making an alteration. Beis HaMedrash is a chiddush. You're studying, you're coming up with new Torah novel. A lot of the Torah Shebal Peh is derived from the Torah, but sometimes it was completely initiative of the sages, and they just leaned it on the verse. There is much more human invention and innovation in the concept of Beis HaMedrash than in the concept of altering a verse. And now, based on that, we'll understand why. By the Paschal, it's a given that we go to Beis Medrash route. And by the Benos Tzelafchad, the daughters of Tzelafchad, by the laws of inheritance, we only go the Beis Medrash route as a secondary choice. But the primary approach is to say that we have to rearrange the verse. Why? Because regarding Paschal, it is a given, according to all opinions, that Moshe only heard that mitzvah from God after the people demanded it. After the people demanded it, Moshe got that mitzvah. Which means over there, this mitzvah was a completely stimulated from below. Moshe never heard of that before because it was never given to him before. Now, there is a question whether it was even intended to be given. According to one, Rashi says elsewhere that had the people not asked it, eventually God would have told Moshe about it anyways. That's what Rashi says. But in the Talmud, It doesn't say that regarding over there. There's no, in Chazal, we don't, at least in the Talmud, it doesn't say. It says it about other mitzvah, about the daughters of Tzelafchad. Meaning, according to, it's quite possible that mitzvah was completely driven and brought forth completely through human endeavor. Obviously given to us by God, but after our awakening. That's why what fits for it, the method that it happened, Beis Medrash. Because that's what Beis Medrash means. As we said earlier, study hall learning is very much driven by human innovation, our creativity. The daughter of Tzelafchad, there are two opinions in the Talmud. According to one opinion, God had already told Moshe, even before the whole Tzelafchad story happened, God had already told Moshe this detail about female inheritance when there's no male heir. God already saw, but Moshe forgot. Moshe forgot that part. He had, whatever reason, it says it was a punishment to Moshe that he forgot that. Because he said, he once said earlier, which seemed a little bit haughty. God forbid Moshe was the most humble of all people. He told the Jewish people that whatever, we set up a whole judicial system, whatever is small, minor issues you'll bring to them, and a major issue you'll bring to me. And that tiny sentence implied, like, I, Moshe, know. So because of that, as a tikkun, as a rectification for that, Moshe had to admit on a mitzvah that he doesn't know. And he should have known because he forgot. Moshe never forgot, but this he forgot. Oh, so what do you see? Comes out that what the Benot Tzelafchad did, what the daughters of Tzelafchad did, they didn't, so to speak, create the mitzvah or bring forth a new mitzvah. The mitzvah was given already. They just reminded the mitzvah. What they merited was their participation was they got it written down. Because initially it wasn't written, and now it was inscribed in the Torah as part of it because they brought it back a second time and it got written. So there is a human element to it, but less because Moshe it was not like the Paschal lamb, which was not the second, the Pesach Sheni, the second Paschal lamb, which wasn't even, it was never even given. That means from below, the Jewish people drove the entire mitzvah. Here we didn't drive the commandment, we just drove it to be written down, the daughters of Tzelafchad. There is another opinion, and therefore, what suits that kind of what fits that mode? What fits that mode? Not the Beis Medrash, because Beis Medrash is complete innovation. What fits that mode is that you have a verse given by God and we alter it. So in this case, you get it written down. You see, it's like essentially it's coming from above, but we have some active participants with it. Then there's another opinion who says, no, Moshe never heard it, he didn't forget it, but rather when they brought it up, that's when God gave the mitzvah to Moshe. Oh, according to this opinion, the female inheritance is on par. It's the same like Paschal lamb, the Pesach Sheni. Both of them are completely driven by human endeavors. And therefore, Rashi brings it as a second interpretation. That this whole question was presented in the Beis Medrash, which Beis Medrash implies real innovation, real chiddush. Now, just to the final cry, I said there has to be something Mashiach here. The Rebbe says as the conclusion of the whole talk, so beautiful, and he says, if you see that humans can demand and can bring forth and ask and challenge and bring forth new things that weren't there before. And the daughters of Tzelafchad managed that, particularly what? That they got themselves a piece of the land of Israel. Which means that weren't supposed to get a piece of the land, got an inheritance of the land of Israel because they demanded. So if the Jewish people demand from God the redemption, If we demand the redemption strongly, sincerely, like those girls demanded it, we will get our land and our portion of the land of Israel, which means we will get the ultimate redemption. In other words, even if God forbid, for whatever reason, God has more time, He's not in a rush. The fact that we demand it and call out for it and cry out for it causes it to become expedited. We can have an influence and drive the redemption now. We merit to see it now.